Support provided by Walters, Papillon, Thomas Cullins, LLC, specializing in business litigation and personal injury cases for over 40 years.
Today, I am here to talk about effective prevention in the Metoo movement. Now, some of you might be asking, what is the Metoo movement and how does it affect my business? Metoo movement is a movement against sexual harassment and sexual assault. The movement went viral in October of 2017, and as a hashtag on social media, it began to spread widely. Its purpose is to demonstrate the widespread prevalence of sexual assault and harassment, especially in the workplace. Tarana Burke, a social activist and community organizer, began using the phrase Me Too as early as 2006. The phrase was later popularized by actress Alyssa Milano on Twitter in 2017. Milano encouraged victims to tweet their experience with sexual violence and give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem. Well, within 24 hours, Me Too was retweeted more than 500,000 times on Twitter and over 12 million times on Facebook. Since 2017, we have seen survivors of sexual harassment and assault speaking out in droves. Survivors have found safety in numbers and feel more empowered to speak up about the injustices they've faced. This movement has helped bring attention to perpetrators of sexual violence in the film and music industry, as well as large public companies. Media figures such as Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, Bill Cosby, Louis C.K., and R. Kelly are being held accountable for these allegations of abuse brought forth by survivors. We are truly in uncharted territory. This movement, for the first time in our history, has given a voice to experiences of sexual violence that often remain unseen, silenced, overlooked, and denied. Me Too uncovered what advocates like me already know. Sexual violence is happening at epidemic levels. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1 in 2 women and 1 in 6 men experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. This can include a range of acts experienced as a child or as an adult, and includes rape, attempted rape, being forced to penetrate someone, non-consensual touching, kissing, and groping. When you take into account experiences of sexual harassment, the numbers increase dramatically. A recent study found that 81% of women and 43% of men experience sexual harassment in their lifetime. These numbers are staggeringly high, higher than some of you may have thought before today. And the reason why this issue affects your business is because it affects your employees. Whether they experience sexual violence in their homes, schools, or communities prior to being employed at your business, or they experience sexual harassment in the workplace, we all know and love someone who has been affected by this epidemic. So I'd like to take some time today to share why this issue is important and why employers must take action to prevent and effectively respond to sexual harassment. I'll also talk about ways to consider how sexual violence affects your employees outside of the workplace and how ultimately it is all of our responsibility to take a part in preventing sexual violence. And I don't have to start by telling you that sexual harassment has negative effects on both companies and employees. Simply put, sexual harassment is bad for business. Experiencing sexual harassment can affect an individual's mental, physical, and emotional health, as well as their personal life and their ability to be a successful employee. Numerous studies have shown that experiencing sexual harassment can cause an employee to experience decreased productivity at work due to feeling unsafe in the workplace or avoiding individuals who exhibit those behaviors, increased risk of workplace accidents due to being distracted, and lost wages due to increased absences at work due to wanting to avoid the harassers and/or experiencing anxiety and depression. Sexual harassment can result in reduced opportunities for on-the-job learning and advancement. If an employee experiences harassment from a supervisor or leader in the company, they will opt out of engaging in growth opportunities to avoid that individual. Sexual harassment can force job change, unemployment, and abandonment of well-paying jobs. In some instances, individuals decide to leave a job due to sexual harassment before finding another opportunity. This could be because they either chose not to report the harasser to the company for fear of retaliation, or because they did report the individual and no action was taken by the company. This also affects employers because sexual harassment in the workplace can increase employee turnover, not to mention the high legal costs. According to the Equal Opportunity Commission, in 2017, businesses paid out $46.3 million in monetary benefits for employees in relation to sexual harassment charges. These costs likely substantially underestimate the actual payouts made by employers because the EEOC only litigates a small number of these each year. In sum, sexual harassment affects employee loyalty to the company. Overall, it's our job to keep our employees happy and well. There's substantial research to show that workplace sexual harassment is associated with reduced motivation and commitment, as well as lower job satisfaction and withdrawal. And this affects the entire culture, not just the individuals experiencing harassment. Your employees observe what culture allows, and if your workplace culture avoids holding oppressors accountable, your employees will lose respect for you and for your company. I'm here to tell you that we are living in a time of change. And while it has been exciting for many, it has also been unsettling. With change comes disruption and leaving behind what we once knew in order to grow and evolve. The good news is that all of this change can make the workplace better all around, and women and men will benefit from the progress taking place. Now, I know you're aware of sexual harassment as an issue and you're taking efforts in your business to avoid it, but what actually goes on in your workplace? It's easy to identify the very graphic conduct coming out of Hollywood as sexual harassment, but what may be happening in your workplace is likely more subtle. It's a good reminder that all of the following conduct is considered sexual harassment. Unwelcome flirtations or advances, even in a joking manner. Comments about a person's appearance, dress, or body. Terms of address like honey, baby, or sweetheart. Intrusive questions or comments about a coworker's personal life or sex life. Any unnecessary and unwanted physical contact, such as touching, rubbing, or hugging. Asking for sexual favors, even joking about it. Innuendos, gestures, and sexual jokes. And finally, display or transmission of sexually suggestive electronic content. Employers need to be aware of how employees actually interact on a day-to-day basis. Your company is at risk if a culture remains where some or all of such conduct is tolerated. But there is a cure. There is a way for us to prevent it. But what we are learning now is that the old approach is not sufficient. Check the box policies do not work, and online training is not effective. Prevention is protection. Workplace culture change is the only viable option to ensuring that our workplace is safe for everyone. You might be asking, what is workplace culture? And I'm sure many of us have heard this term but can't really define it. It's the shared beliefs, values, and attitudes and set of assumptions that people in a workplace share. It's shaped by many different factors. First, there's leadership. This includes the way your leaders communicate and interact with employees, what they communicate and emphasize, their vision for the future, what they celebrate and recognize, what they expect, the stories they tell, how they make decisions, the extent to which they are trusted, and the beliefs and perceptions they reinforce. It's also your management, how your organization is managed, its systems, procedures, structures, hierarchy, controls, and goals. It also takes into account the degree to which managers empower employees and support and interact with them. Your employment policies, which include attendance, dress code, and code of conduct. It also includes how your policies and practices are developed, communicated, and reinforced. What opportunities does your business provide? What about recruitment, hiring, compensation, benefits, recognition, training, advancement, performance management, wellness, and work-life balance. How does your company offer the opportunity to staff to contribute to the strategic vision? And what are your workplace traditions? Are they inclusive to all staff? Who are the people you hire? Their personalities, beliefs, values, diverse skill sets, and experiences. What types of interactions occur between employees? Are they collaborative or confrontational? Supportive or non-supportive? Social or task-oriented? Do you have a formal or more relaxed business style? Do you have a clear vision, mission, and values? And do they reflect the beliefs and philosophies of your organization? Is your mission inspiring to your employees? To what extent are the mission, vision, and values widely communicated and continuously emphasized throughout your company? What are the objects, artifacts, and other physical signs located in your workplace? What's your work environment like? These include what people place on their desks, what the organization hangs on its walls, how it allocates space in offices, what the offices look like, and how common areas are presented and utilized. How does communication flow in your workplace? Specifically, what are the degree, type, frequency, and type of interaction and communication between leaders and employees and managers? And finally, success. How do you define success in your workplace? What does your business celebrate and recognize? How do you show appreciation to your employees? Every workplace has a culture, whether or not you set out to create it. The important thing is that positive culture is significant. It attracts talent, it drives employee engagement, it impacts employee happiness and satisfaction, and it affects their work performance. On the other hand, a negative culture can produce frequent conflict among staff, high levels of burnout and turnover at a company, poor work performance, and overall dissatisfaction with the job. Workplace culture should absolutely be intentional. However, most companies let workplace culture form naturally without defining what they want it to be, and that's a mistake. For example, creating policies and workplace programs based on what other employers do versus whether or not they fit into your work culture. Not considering a culture fit when hiring new employees. Tolerating management styles that threaten employee engagement and retention. Not developing and communicating a clear and inspiring mission, vision, and values. Not considering how everyday actions or inactions as leaders affect the formation of workplace culture. For these reasons, it's important to step back, evaluate, and define your workplace culture, both what it is now and what you want it to be. And think of how all of these factors either contribute to or take away from your desired culture. It's also necessary to consider these factors in our changing cultural landscape to ensure that, as the leader of your organization, you are doing everything you can to ensure a safe workplace. You may be asking, what does this have to do with sexual harassment? So it's important because when I tell you that culture change is the only viable option, I think some people get lost in what that means. I think a lot of employers out there are using online trainings or check-the-box policies and thinking that they're protected. And I'm here to tell you it's not that simple. What I'm here to say is that there are different ways you can inject this sort of understanding within your culture, whether you have one identified or whether you're still forming it. So let's identify what type of work culture does help prevent sexual harassment. So let's take leadership. One of the most important parts, who's your leader? Do members of your leadership team agree with and support the anti-harassment policies? Do they act consistently in their communication with employees? Do your employees trust and value your leaders? If you expect to protect your company from sexual harassment, buy-in absolutely has to come from the top. The way your CEO engages with employees is critical to ensuring that boundaries are maintained and that employees feel safe and supported in their work. What about your management? Does your company have effective and well-communicated systems and controls in place to intervene in problematic behavior? Are your employees and managers interacting? How do you respond to a disclosure of harassment? Or do you? In order to intervene early, you must ensure that your managers talk with their direct reports on a regular basis in a one-to-one setting. This builds trust between employees and managers and gives the employee space to talk about conflicts with coworkers or instances of problematic behavior they see with other employees. The first place you should start is, do you actually have an anti-sexual harassment policy? And how is it communicated? Many leaders know that you have a policy on the books, but you have little idea what it actually entails. Most policies are your basic check the box, copy and paste from a website or something your attorney recommended. However, most policies don't cover things like early intervention, confidentiality of reports, and who to report to. On top of this, employees typically receive ineffective training, either in the form of a short 30-minute seminar in the conference room or through an online system. Think about the way you provide opportunities in your workplace. When you're hiring someone, do you complete a background check? More than just a criminal background check, are you checking references? Are you asking about how this person might fit in your culture? Do you have a policy against employing someone who has been dismissed for sexual harassment at a previous job? How do reports of sexual harassment affect an employee's ability to move up within the company? Or do they? It is critical that your company develops screening tools to ensure that you identify problematic employees early. This includes improving your hiring practice and considering ways that your opportunities for advancement are offered in the company. One of the most important parts is, what behavior do you expect from your employees versus what you allow? This is a tricky one. You have to state your expectations of employees on day one of their appointment to your company and reinforce them regularly. This even includes your top performers who may be exhibiting problematic behavior, but they're doing a lot for the company. Do you have core values and a code of conduct? Are your team members acting in accordance with those? Any behavior that your employees exhibit that go against your core values and code of conduct should be addressed immediately. This will help you maintain a consistent message to all employees that harassing and other problematic behavior will not be tolerated by the company. The work environment. You'd be surprised how overlooked this one is. What type of images and objects are in your workplace? What do they say to your employees and your clients? Do they reinforce your values and code of conduct? Make sure that you're being intentional about your environment to ensure that it's safe and welcoming to all employees. And finally, communication. Do your employees know who to talk to if they experience sexual harassment? How are they handled in your office? In order to effectively intervene in sexual harassment, you must have clear lines of communication. An experience of sexual harassment can be stressful, upsetting, and isolating to employees. Studies have shown that over 70% of employees decline to report sexual harassment at their workplace because they fear not being believed or taken seriously, or they are afraid that they will lose their job. Overwhelmed yet? Feeling a little worried that you don't have things in place? Well, I hit on a lot of points that all of us might think of pretty regularly, either in a formalized capacity or not. And I want to talk to you about why I'm so passionate about this. I had to learn the hard way, as most leaders do. As Brandon alluded to, the story of STAR is basically that in 2009, when I was working at the East Baton Rouge District Attorney's Office, Hiller Moore believed in me enough to support my efforts to transition the Rape Crisis Center, a small 3-person department in his office, into a nonprofit. In 2012, that dream became a reality when we incorporated into a 501c3 nonprofit and rebranded the organization as STAR. Starting out, I was a young, vivacious 27-year-old CEO with big vision and a lot of energy. In our first year of incorporating, our staff jumped from 3 to 5 and then grew exponentially each year after that. In 2015, we opened up in New Orleans and the following year in Alexandria. 7 years later, we are now a thriving organization with 39 staff across 3 branches. And while this success helped us meet a growing need for our services, we struggled internally along the way. To manage growth of an organization on top of the issues we deal with was exhausting and very difficult at times. My staff often suffered from burnout and compassion fatigue, which caused conflict in the office, low morale, and at times it felt like we lost our purpose. But we took a step back, reevaluated our culture. We created robust policies and procedures, enacted new practices that helped our employees feel more supported, and it helped bring back the meaningfulness to our work. I stand here before you as someone who is not here to preach, but as a leader who is like you, in the trenches, working to figure out each new bend in the road that will bring my organization. Because of these experiences, I feel compelled to share my knowledge and make it applicable to the major issues companies are facing. My expertise in working with survivors of sexual violence and with developing positive work culture offers a unique perspective on how to better tackle this issue. So I appreciate you guys having me here today, and I would like to open it up for questions. All right.
I'm interested in hearing more about your unique perspective, and can you give us an idea of how many people are reporting to you here in Baton Rouge, and what the scope of the issue is, and
Sure.
what happens when they do report?
Sure, so STAR services specifically?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for asking that. So STAR is here in the Baton Rouge community. We offer free and confidential services to sexual assault survivors at any point in their healing. We provide free advocacy. We meet with them at the hospital upon a report and sit with them during the exam. We also do case management. We accompany them to law enforcement interviews in court. We provide individual and group counseling, as well as free legal representation. Last year, we served 1,108 survivors, which was an increase of about 300 survivors from the previous year. So we have had to adjust very quickly. That was a almost 30% increase in survivors served in 1 year without any significant increase in funding. So we are struggling to meet the need. So thank you for that question. Yes, ma'am.
How should a leader handle consensual romantic entanglements in the mountains, particularly if they do not end well?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'll always direct you back to your policies. So if you are abiding by your policies, and make sure that your company allows a relationship among employees. I think that most companies have a policy that prohibits it, because when it ends, it can sometimes end very badly. And if your company has an HR manager, they might be pulling their hair out because your company allows that to happen. But I think as far as consensual relationships go, there isn't much you can do as long as your policies allow it. One of them, unfortunately, probably will leave. Beverly has a question. Oh, she's just standing.
Racheal, I am so proud of the work that STAR does, and having worked at Women's Hospital, very aware of what you do for survivors. But to follow up from what Stafford asked, if I am a woman who calls the police and reports what happens to me, walk me through that process.
Sure.
If I am a man, what happens to me if I report?
Sure.
And if I am a child, you are the service providers, and how do you work with them?
Sure. Specifically, we serve any person of any gender and any age. Typically, when someone contacts us, it's usually because they're in an immediate crisis. Whether it's just happened to them, we follow them throughout the entire system. So if someone calls our hotline and is in need of reporting to the police, we will direct them to the police department in their jurisdiction, and then we will follow up with them to make sure that we are accompanying them to the hospital whenever they get dispatched. As Beverly mentioned, Women's Hospital is our champion. They see the majority of the survivors that we work with in the greater Baton Rouge community, and they have specialized care that they work very hard to maintain and give at no cost to the survivors. Anyone can actually show up at any emergency department in the parish, and STAR will be dispatched, as well as the coroner's office, their sexual assault nurse examiner program. An individual going through an exam can expect to be anywhere from 3 hours to 5 hours, and that includes a very detailed history, collecting evidence, as well as making sure they have any type of preventative medicines they need. After that time, and the survivor is incredibly exhausted, as you can imagine, we send them home with a care package with some new clothing, because typically the clothing is taken from them after a sexual assault for evidence. We send them home with toiletries, and we follow up with them in about 3 days to make sure they have everything they need. Another scenario is that survivors often don't report right away. Many of them, either because of shame or not wanting to believe what happened to them, typically don't tell anyone. And that's why STAR is really important in the community, because we try to make people understand that just because someone didn't report right away doesn't mean it didn't happen. So many of the survivors we served were sexually assaulted as a child, and they're now an adult. Some of them were assaulted weeks, months, or years ago, and they're finally ready to talk about it. So most of our clients are actually given counseling services to help them recover throughout that period of time where they're re-injected back into the crisis of what happened. Did that answer your question? Men and children is the same. Same. We treat everyone the same. Someone standing. Ready for bursting out. Tell me.
Okay, my concern is I've seen this movement occur. It's not working?
You gotta talk really close.
Okay, can you?
Oh, there we go.
Sorry. Is as a, I'm retired now, but as a woman professional in the business world, I have been concerned to see how the men that are accused are automatically assumed guilty.
Sure.
And I'm worried, and I'm not saying that there's not a lot of very legitimate, accusations out there, but I'm worried that there's going to be a backlash for the women professionals that are going up, that they're going to be maybe not as inclined to get that next promotion because of the concern about the Metoo movement and that the accusations that are made, that it just seems like our society is automatically believing them, and the men are on the defensive. And so I wanted to know what your thoughts were
Sure.
about that.
That is something I hear quite frequently, and I want to thank you. I would say that we are experiencing a backlash. The backlash is here. There's nothing, unfortunately, we've seen a huge decrease in belief for survivors. I think that many people think the Me Too movement has been too extreme. They think that many of the survivors are doing it for other reasons besides speaking their truth, whether it's to get money, whether it's to take down another individual. And so I'd say the Me Too backlash is here. And to your point about women leaders, what I see happening is that men are less inclined to mentor women. They're less inclined to go to lunch with women, and they're really trying to protect themselves because they are afraid of getting accused. And so it's absolutely happening, and women are unfortunately at a detriment because of that. Yes, sir.
I do a lot of safety, culture, development at refineries and chemical plants. And one of the things from your standpoint that we do is when a company's concerned about their safety statistics, they will have a safety audit that will be done that will involve surveying people, and it helps them evaluate a safety culture. Now, having said that, are there certain tools or resources that if you're the owner of a company, if you're concerned about what your sexual harassment culture is are there some resources, surveys,
Absolutely.
checklists? Like you went through a bunch of questions,
Yeah.
and that would be a perfect checklist
You know what? I didn't plant this person in the audience, but sir, thank you. We actually have developed a checklist. It's a self-assessment checklist, and if you visit our website here, you can download the checklist, star.ngo/consulting. Also, I will happy to hand out my business card to anyone, and I'll email it to you. But yes, absolutely. So there are opportunities for businesses to review their current policies and really frame it as a safety issue. So we have a short assessment that anyone is welcome to take. And STAR is also available for any feedback, consulting, anything your company might need to support you in getting there. Yes, ma'am.
Racheal Hebert with NRK Construction. I want to turn the presentation. I want to make sure that I'm not misunderstanding something that I heard, and that
Sure.
was if men are sexually assaulted, they are actually brought to the coroner's office and not to the hospital for a check. Is that true? And if not, please correct that information.
Not true. So any person can go to any hospital, emergency department. That's something that was happening 10 years ago. But Dr. Clark has been incredibly transformative in making sure that their SANE program can be dispatched to any hospital in the community. So while men and children don't go to Women's Hospital, they typically go to Our Lady of the Lake, which is, they'll get the same exact services as a female at Women's. Thank you for asking.
So I have a question with regard to cultural issues, organizational cultural issues. Current wisdom in org culture tells us that we really need to be culturally sensitive and engage in the development of cultural competencies. And being relatively new to the South, I found that a number of the items on the list that we have to be careful are really part of the culture here, and there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between holding one responsible for sensitivity to the local culture versus taking offense to what might be somebody's culture. Whether you're currently in the South and you're affectionately treated, or you're in the North and a Southerner happens to affectionately treat you.
Yes.
There might be some, as my friend Michelle said, there might be some potential for over-reporting, which would then minimize the amount of attention given to the truly legitimate complaints. So how do you reconcile that need for cultural competency
Sure.
as well as sensitivity to legitimate types of complaints?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So I have two comments. The first is that affection must be welcome. So one thing I do as a Southerner from South Louisiana is I ask, can I hug you? Before I hug someone. It's as simple as that. We're not changing our culture. We're just making sure you're okay with being touched. If the person says no, fully respect that. The second part is, and I heard laughter, and I'm assuming it's the, oh honey, baby, right? We all do it. As long as you do it to both men and women, it is fine. If you're only calling women baby, that's where you open yourself up for gender discrimination. So I'm just saying, if you're kissing your female colleagues on the cheek, do it to the men too. Thank you. And ask permission.
In follow-up to that backlash, to me, if I was a young man, I would be scared to death to date a woman because they can be accused of anything. What do we tell our kids and our young professionals about being sensitive to Me Too and to not withdraw from society because they're scared to go on a date, or they have to group date now just to get to know people?
Sure. Well, the statistics show that someone is actually more likely to be raped than to be falsely accused of rape. So really, I would reframe that as how are we protecting individuals from not being abused? Because I think the bigger issue is that the false accusations that we see in the news, they far eclipse in the media circuit what's actually happening. And The actual statistics for people that tell and report is about 20%. So of the people that we're accusing of false accusations, they actually are under 2% of the population that are reporting this issue. And so while I do think that I am appreciative that people are becoming more sensitive to the issue and adjusting their behaviors, I think it's a good thing that we're considering, maybe I shouldn't do X, Y, or Z. Maybe I shouldn't get loaded and then try to sleep with someone, right? Because that's actually legally a legal definition of rape.
Support provided by Walters, Papillon, Thomas Cullins, LLC, specializing in business litigation and personal injury cases for over 40 years.